The morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured gardens of Kensington Palace as Catherine, Princess of Wales, stood at her bedroom window, watching her children play in the courtyard below. Prince George was teaching Princess Charlotte how to properly kick a football, while young Prince Louis chased after butterflies with the carefree abandon that only a 4-year-old could possess. The sight filled her heart with both joy and an overwhelming sense of responsibility that had been growing heavier with each passing month. William emerged from their ensuite bathroom, his face still bearing the tension that had become a permanent fixture since his father's coronation. The weight of being heir to the throne had always been present, but, lately, it felt suffocating. He joined Catherine at the window, wrapping his arms around her waist as they both watched their children's innocent games. "They have no idea what's coming, do they?" Catherine whispered, leaning back against her husband's chest. The question hung in the air like morning mist, heavy with implications they had been discussing in hushed tones for weeks. William's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Sometimes I wonder if we're doing the right thing by them. By ourselves. By everyone." His voice carried the weight of generations of royal duty, but also something else, a growing rebellion against a system that had shaped every aspect of his life since birth. The previous evening had been particularly difficult. King Charles had summoned William to Buckingham Palace for what was supposed to be a routine briefing about upcoming royal engagements. Instead, it had turned into a heated discussion about William's recent reluctance to participate in certain traditional ceremonies and his increasingly vocal opinions about modernizing the monarchy. "You seem to forget, William, that we are servants to the crown first, and individuals second," Charles had said, his voice echoing in the ornate study. "Personal desires cannot supersede duty." But William had reached a breaking point. "And what about our children, father? What about their right to choose their own path?" The conversation had ended abruptly when William stormed out, leaving Charles standing alone among portraits of their ancestors who had all made similar sacrifices for the crown. Now, as Catherine felt the familiar flutter in her stomach, a sensation she had been experiencing for several weeks but hadn't yet acknowledged, she knew their world was about to change in ways nobody could predict. "I need to tell you something," she said softly, turning in William's arms to face him. Her green eyes held a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Before she could continue, their private secretary knocked on the bedroom door. "Your Royal Highnesses, forgive the intrusion, but His Majesty has requested an immediate audience with you both at Buckingham Palace." William and Catherine exchanged glances. They had been expecting this summons, but the timing couldn't have been worse, or perhaps, Catherine thought with a sudden surge of determination, it couldn't have been better. The drive to Buckingham Palace was conducted in relative silence, both lost in their own thoughts. The London streets were bustling with their usual morning chaos, tourists gathering around the palace gates hoping for a glimpse of royalty, completely unaware of the drama unfolding within the walls of the monarchy's most sacred institution. As their car pulled through the palace gates, Catherine reached for William's hand. "Whatever happens in there, we face it together," she said firmly. William squeezed her hand, drawing strength from her unwavering support. "Together," he agreed, though his mind was already racing through the conversation he knew was inevitable. King Charles was waiting for them in the audience room, a formal space that had witnessed countless royal discussions throughout the centuries. The morning light streaming through the tall windows created an almost ethereal atmosphere, but the tension in the room was palpable. "Please, sit," Charles said, gesturing to the chairs across from his desk. His tone was measured, but William could detect the underlying frustration that had been building between them for months. "I've been thinking about our conversation last evening," Charles began, his fingers drumming slightly on the polished mahogany desk. "And I believe we need to address certain concerns about your commitment to your royal duties." Catherine felt her stomach tighten, not just from nerves but from the secret she was carrying. She glanced at William, who was sitting straighter in his chair, his jaw set in the determined expression she knew so well. "Actually, Father, Catherine and I have something we need to discuss with you," William said, his voice steady despite the gravity of what they were about to reveal. Charles raised an eyebrow, clearly not expecting to lose control of the conversation so quickly. I see. Well, I suppose this is as good a time as any to clear the air. The room fell silent except for the distant sound of traffic from the mall and the soft ticking of an antique clock on the mantelpiece. Catherine could feel her heart racing as she prepared for what would undoubtedly be one of the most significant moments in their lives. William took a deep breath, looking directly at his father. We've been doing a lot of thinking lately about our role in the monarchy, about what kind of future we want for our children, and about what we believe is best for the institution as a whole. Charles's expression grew more serious. Go on. The truth is, William continued, we believe the monarchy needs to evolve more rapidly than it has been. The public is changing, the world is changing, and, if we don't adapt, we risk becoming irrelevant. Catherine watched as Charles's face grew stonier with each word. She knew this was just the beginning of what they needed to say, and the hardest part was yet to come. What exactly are you proposing? Charles asked, his voice carefully controlled. William and Catherine exchanged another glance. They had rehearsed this moment countless times, but, now that it was here, the magnitude of what they were about to propose felt overwhelming. We want to take a step back from traditional royal duties for a period of time, Catherine said, her voice clear and determined. We want to focus on causes that truly matter to us, on raising our children with more freedom to choose their own paths, and on finding new ways to serve the public that feel more authentic and impactful. The silence that followed was deafening. Charles stared at them both, processing what he had just heard. Outside, the changing of the guard was taking place, a reminder of the centuries-old traditions they were challenging. You're talking about abandoning your responsibilities, Charles said finally, his voice low and dangerous. No, William replied firmly. We're talking about redefining them. The conversation that followed would be remembered as one of the most pivotal moments in modern royal history, though at the time, none of them could have predicted just how far-reaching the consequences would be. As Catherine sat there, listening to the heated exchange between father and son, she placed her hand protectively over her still flat stomach. The secret she carried would add another layer of complexity to an already explosive situation, and she wondered if the timing of this new life was a sign that change was exactly what their family needed. The morning sun continued to stream through the palace windows as 3 generations of royalty grappled with questions that had no easy answers, unaware that by the end of the day, their carefully guarded secret would become front-page news around the world. William's phone buzzed with a text message from his private secretary, urgent, media inquiries flooding in about your Royal Highness's meeting with His Majesty. How should we respond? The 3 royals looked at each other with growing alarm as they realized their private family discussion was about to become very public indeed. The surprise they had planned to announce was about to become a scandal that would rock the very foundations of the British monarchy. Catherine's hand moved to her stomach again, and she made a decision that would change everything. There's something else, she said quietly, causing both men to stop their argument and look at her. Something that makes this conversation even more urgent than you realize. The weight of her words settled over the room like a heavy blanket, and Charles felt a chill of premonition. Whatever his daughter-in-law was about to reveal would change everything they thought they knew about their family's future. In the distance, Big Ben chimed 11 o'clock, marking not just the passage of time, but the beginning of a new chapter in royal history that none of them were prepared for. The silence in the audience room stretched on as Catherine's words hung in the air. King Charles leaned forward in his chair, his weathered hands clasped tightly together, while William reached instinctively for his wife's hand. The weight of unspoken revelation filled the ornate space, making even the familiar sounds of the palace seem muffled and distant. Catherine, Charles said slowly, his voice softer now, what aren't you telling us? She took a deep breath, feeling the magnitude of the moment. I'm pregnant, she said simply, though the words carried the force of a thunderclap in the quiet room. William's head snapped toward her, his eyes wide with shock. In all their discussions about stepping back from royal duties, this possibility hadn't been part of their planning. His hand tightened around hers as the implications began to sink in. Charles sat back heavily in his chair, the color draining from his face. A 4th grandchild, another heir, another life that would be shaped by the very traditions and expectations they were now questioning. The irony wasn't lost on any of them. "How long have you known?" William asked quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "I suspected for a few weeks, but I only confirmed it yesterday," Catherine replied, her eyes never leaving his face. "I was waiting for the right moment to tell you, but after last night, after this morning, I realized there might not be a perfect time." Charles stood abruptly and walked to one of the tall windows, his hands clasped behind his back as he stared out at the palace gardens. The tourists below were oblivious to the drama unfolding above them, continuing their excited chatter and photo-taking as if this were just another ordinary day. "Do you understand," Charles said without turning around, "what this means for everything you've just proposed?" William felt a surge of protectiveness for both his wife and their unborn child. "It means we need to make these changes even more urgently," he said firmly. "This baby deserves the chance to grow up with choices, with the freedom to be more than just a spare to the heir." Charles turned back to face them, and, for the first time, William saw something in his father's expression that surprised him, not anger, but deep, profound sadness. "You speak of choice as if I had any," Charles said quietly. "As if any of us had any. Do you think I chose to wait 70 years to become king? Do you think I chose to have my every decision scrutinized, my every word analyzed, my every relationship dissected in the press?" Catherine felt tears prick her eyes at the raw pain in her father-in-law's voice. Despite their disagreements, she could see the lonely boy who had grown up in the shadow of his mother's crown, the man who had sacrificed his first love for duty, the father who was now watching his son threaten to abandon everything he had spent his life preserving. "But that's exactly why things need to change," William said, his voice gentle but unwavering. "So that our children, all of them, can have something closer to a normal life. So that they can choose to serve the crown because they want to, not because they have no other option." The conversation was interrupted by a sharp knock on the door. Charles's private secretary entered with an urgent expression. "Your Majesty, forgive the interruption, but we have a situation. The press has somehow gotten wind of this meeting, and there are rumors circulating about a major announcement from the Prince and Princess of Wales." Catherine felt her stomach drop. How could they possibly know? The secretary looked uncomfortable. "It appears someone photographed your Royal Highnesses entering the palace this morning looking serious. Speculation has been building all morning, and now several major outlets are claiming to have inside sources suggesting significant news is forthcoming." Charles closed his eyes briefly, then opened them with the resigned expression of someone who had dealt with media speculation for decades. "How much time do we have before this becomes unmanageable?" "The communications team estimates we have perhaps 2 hours before the speculation reaches fever pitch. They're recommending we prepare some kind of statement." William and Catherine looked at each other, both realizing their carefully planned private conversation had suddenly become a public relations crisis. The baby announcement, which should have been a moment of family joy, was now entangled with their desire to reshape their royal roles. "What do we tell them?" Catherine asked, her hand unconsciously moving to her stomach. Charles began pacing the length of the room, his mind working through the various scenarios and their potential consequences. "We could deny any major changes and announce the pregnancy as a separate, joyful piece of news," he said slowly. "No," William said firmly. "We're not going to lie or hide who we want to be. Our children deserve parents who are authentic, who stand up for what they believe in." Catherine felt a surge of love and admiration for her husband's unwavering principles, even as she worried about the storm they were about to unleash. "Then, what do you propose?" Charles asked, stopping his pacing to look directly at his son. "We tell the truth," Catherine said, surprising herself with her own decisiveness. "We announce that we're expecting a 4th child, and we also announce our intention to modernize how we fulfill our royal duties. We frame it as evolution, not abandonment." Charles stared at her for a long moment, and Catherine could see him weighing decades of royal protocol against the determination in her eyes. "The Queen would have handled this differently," he said finally, though his tone wasn't accusatory, it was almost wistful. Grandmother understood the need for change too, William said gently. She spent 70 years adapting the monarchy to changing times. We're not abandoning her legacy, we're continuing it. Another knock interrupted them, this time more urgent. The private secretary returned, looking even more flustered. Your Majesty, I'm afraid the situation has escalated. A photographer with a telephoto lens has captured images of the Princess of Wales that are being interpreted as confirmatory of pregnancy rumors. Catherine's face flushed. She had been feeling queasy all morning and had unconsciously been holding her stomach during their car ride to the palace. So the baby announcement is no longer optional, Charles said grimly. It was never going to be optional anyway, William said. We've never hidden our children from the public. Charles nodded slowly, then sat back down across from them. When he spoke again, his voice carried the authority of a monarch, but also the concern of a father and grandfather. If we're going to do this, we do it properly. We control the narrative instead of letting it control us. He paused, looking between William and Catherine. But, I need to understand exactly what you're proposing for your royal duties. Because once we announce this, there's no taking it back. William leaned forward, his expression earnest. We want to focus on fewer causes, but go deeper with our involvement. Instead of cutting ribbons and attending galas, we want to create real, measurable change in the areas we're passionate about: mental health, environmental conservation, early childhood development. We want to spend more time with our children while they're young, Catherine added. To be present for the ordinary moments, not just the state occasions. And we want this new baby to grow up knowing they have choices, William continued. That their worth isn't determined by their position in the line of succession. Charles listened intently, his expression thoughtful. And you believe this approach will strengthen the monarchy rather than weaken it? We believe it will make us more relatable, more relevant to ordinary families, Catherine said. People are struggling with work-life balance, with raising children in an uncertain world. If we can show that even royals face these challenges and are working to address them, it creates a connection that formal ceremonies never could. The clock on the mantelpiece chimed noon, and Charles realized they had been talking for over an hour. The press would be expecting some kind of response soon, and the longer they waited, the more speculation would grow. There's something else you need to consider, Charles said carefully. If you step back from traditional duties, other working royals will need to take on more responsibilities. Your choices affect the entire family. William nodded. We've thought about that. Princess Anne has always been one of the hardest working royals, and she's often said she prefers substantive engagements to ceremonial ones. Edward and Sophie have been increasing their duties as well. And, as Charlotte and George get older, they can gradually take on appropriate roles if they choose to. If they choose to, Charles repeated, and William could hear both hope and skepticism in his voice. Catherine felt another wave of nausea, this one definitely pregnancy-related rather than nerves. I think we need to make a decision soon, she said. Both about the announcement and about our future roles. This uncertainty isn't good for any of us. Charles stood again, but this time his movement seemed more purposeful than restless. Very well. We'll announce the pregnancy with joy and congratulations, as is appropriate. And we'll also announce that the Prince and Princess of Wales are evolving their approach to royal service to focus on initiatives where they can make the most significant impact. William felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. Are you saying you support our decision? Charles was quiet for a long moment, looking between his son and daughter-in-law. I'm saying I love my family more than I fear change. And perhaps it's time to trust that the monarchy is strong enough to evolve with the times rather than despite them. Catherine felt tears of relief spring to her eyes. She had been prepared for a battle, but instead found understanding and support from the man who had the most to lose from their decision. Thank you, she whispered. Charles nodded, then moved toward his desk to summon his communications team. But, understand this, we announce this together, as a united family. Whatever challenges come from this decision, we face them together. As the palace machinery began to mobilize around their momentous announcement, Catherine placed her hand over her stomach once more, this time with hope rather than anxiety. Their fourth child would be born into a royal family that was actively choosing to prioritize love, authenticity, and meaningful service over rigid tradition. The surprise from the palace was about to become public, and none of them could predict exactly how the world would react. But, for the first time in months, Catherine felt truly hopeful about their family's future. The communications team assembled in record time, their usual calm efficiency replaced by barely controlled urgency. Senior press officers, constitutional advisors, and protocol experts filled the conference room adjacent to Charles's private office, their laptops open and phones buzzing with increasingly frantic messages from media outlets around the world. Sarah Chen, the palace's director of communications, spread several draft statements across the mahogany conference table. Her usually immaculate appearance showed subtle signs of stress, a strand of hair escaped from her chignon, and she clutched her third cup of coffee since the crisis began. The pregnancy announcement is straightforward, she said, addressing the royal trio who had joined the emergency meeting. Congratulations, due date, well wishes for the family. Standard protocol. She paused, looking at the second set of documents. The announcement about changing royal duties is more complex. We need to be very careful about the language we use. William picked up one of the draft statements, scanning the formal language that somehow managed to make their heartfelt decision sound like corporate restructuring. This makes it sound like we're abandoning our responsibilities rather than reimagining them. That's precisely the perception we need to avoid, Charles said, settling into his chair at the head of the table. The monarchy's strength has always been its ability to adapt while maintaining continuity. We need to present this as evolution, not revolution. Catherine, who had been quietly reviewing the constitutional implications document, looked up with concern. What exactly are the legal ramifications of our decision? Can we actually modify our role without parliamentary approval? Constitutional advisor Lord Pemberton, a distinguished man in his 70s who had served the crown for decades, cleared his throat. Your Royal Highness, the beauty and complexity of our unwritten constitution is that many aspects of royal duty are based on tradition and expectation rather than legal requirement. You cannot abdicate your position in the line of succession without formal process, but you can certainly redefine how you fulfill your royal service. However, he continued, his tone becoming more serious, there will be political implications. The government may have opinions about how active working royals contribute to Britain's soft power and international relations. Charles's phone buzzed with a message from the Prime Minister's office. He glanced at it and frowned. Speaking of the government, Number 10 is requesting an urgent briefing about our announcement. Sarah looked at her watch. We have approximately 45 minutes before the speculation becomes uncontainable. Several major outlets are preparing to run with the pregnancy rumors, with or without confirmation. Catherine felt another wave of morning sickness, this one intensified by stress. I need some fresh air, she said quietly to William, who immediately stood to escort her to the private terrace. Outside, the London afternoon was crisp and clear, the kind of weather that typically drew crowds to the palace gates. Indeed, Catherine could see the usual gathering of tourists and royal watchers, their cameras and phones ready to capture any glimpse of activity. Are we doing the right thing? She asked William as they stood together overlooking the palace gardens. Not just for us, but for the monarchy itself? William considered her question carefully. When I think about what kind of king I want to be someday, I don't see myself standing on balconies waving at crowds. I see myself working directly with people, getting my hands dirty with real problems, making changes that actually matter. Catherine nodded, understanding completely. And I want our children to see that service means more than ceremony. That their titles can be tools for good rather than golden handcuffs. They were interrupted by Sarah appearing at the terrace door. Your Royal Highnesses, we really do need to finalize the statement. The BBC is reporting that they'll have a major royal announcement within the hour. Returning to the conference room, they found Charles reviewing the latest draft with an expression of growing satisfaction. I think we have something that captures both the joy of the pregnancy and the purposeful nature of your new approach to royal service." He handed them the revised statement, and Catherine read it aloud. "Their Royal Highnesses the Prince and Princess of Wales are delighted to announce that they are expecting their fourth child. The princess is in good health, and the baby is expected in the summer of 2025. She paused, then continued, "Additionally, their Royal Highnesses are pleased to announce an evolution in their approach to royal service. Beginning in the new year, they will focus their efforts on fewer but more substantial initiatives where they can make measurable, long-term impact. This refined focus will allow them to deepen their involvement in causes closest to their hearts while continuing to serve the Crown and the Commonwealth with dedication and authenticity." William felt a surge of approval. "That captures exactly what we want to communicate. It's positive, purposeful, and doesn't sound like we're running away from our responsibilities." Lord Pemberton nodded approvingly. "The language is careful but clear. It acknowledges change without suggesting abandonment of duty." Charles stood and walked to the window, watching the crowd gathering outside. "There will still be criticism," he said. "There will be those who say we're weakening the monarchy, that we're giving in to modern pressures rather than maintaining timeless traditions. But there will also be those who say we're finally making the monarchy relevant to contemporary life," Catherine countered. "That we're showing royal service can be both meaningful and authentic." Sarah began typing rapidly on her laptop. "I'll coordinate with all major outlets for simultaneous release. We'll also need to prepare for follow-up questions about specifics, which duties you'll be stepping back from, which you'll be maintaining, timeline for implementation." William pulled out his phone and scrolled through the messages that had been accumulating. "My private secretary says Heads Together has already received dozens of media inquiries. Apparently, there's speculation that our mental health initiatives might be connected to this announcement." Catherine felt a flash of anger at the implication. "They're suggesting we're having mental health issues?" "Not directly," William said quickly, "but the media loves to connect dots, even when there aren't any dots to connect." Charles turned back to the group with a determined expression. "Which is exactly why we control this narrative from the beginning. We present our decision as a positive choice made by thoughtful, committed royals, not as a response to pressure or problems." The next hour passed in a whirlwind of coordinated activity. Press releases were finalized, key stakeholders were briefed, and security preparations were made for the inevitable media frenzy that would follow the announcement. As they prepared for the official release, Catherine found herself thinking about their children. George was at school, blissfully unaware that his world was about to change. Charlotte was in her art lesson, and Louis was napping at Kensington Palace. By the time they returned home that evening, their family would be front-page news around the world. "Have you thought about how we'll explain this to the children?" she asked William during a brief quiet moment. "We tell them the truth, in age-appropriate ways," he replied. "That Mummy and Daddy are going to have a new baby, and that we're also going to change some things about our work so we can spend more time as a family and do jobs that make us happy." Catherine smiled, appreciating his ability to simplify complex adult decisions into concepts their children could understand. "George will probably want to know if the baby will interfere with his football practice schedule. And Charlotte will want to know if she can help pick out the baby's clothes," William added with a grin. Sarah interrupted their moment with a final document. "The press release goes live in 10 minutes. Are we all comfortable with the final version?" Charles read through it one more time, then looked at his son and daughter-in-law. "This is your decision, your announcement. Are you ready?" Catherine felt the familiar flutter in her stomach, their unborn child's reminder that the future was already in motion, regardless of their fears or doubts. "We're ready," she said firmly. William squeezed her hand. "Together," he murmured, echoing their earlier promise. At precisely 3 p.m. London time, Palace Communications simultaneously released the statement to all major news outlets. Within minutes, the news was breaking on television screens around the world, and social media exploded with reactions ranging from ecstatic congratulations to fierce criticism. Standing at the conference room window, the three royals watched as the crowd outside the palace gates began to swell. Reporters appeared with cameras and microphones, tourists pointed and speculated, and royal watchers who had camped out for hours suddenly found their patience rewarded with genuine news. "No going back now," Charles said quietly. Catherine placed one hand on her stomach and the other in William's, feeling the weight and excitement of the moment. Their announcement would be analyzed, debated, and discussed for months to come. But, for now, in this moment, she felt only relief that their family's truth was finally public. Their surprise from the palace was no longer a secret, and the world's reaction was just beginning. The real work, proving that their new approach to royal service would strengthen rather than weaken the monarchy, would start tomorrow. But, tonight, they would go home to their children as a family that had chosen authenticity over tradition, love over duty, and hope over fear. The fourth child growing within Catherine would be born into a royal family that had dared to change, and that felt like the most precious gift they could offer any of their children. The first 24 hours after the announcement felt like living inside a hurricane. Catherine woke the following morning to the sound of helicopters circling Kensington Palace, their cameras trained on any window that might offer a glimpse of the expectant royal family. The world's media had descended on London with unprecedented intensity, transforming the usually peaceful palace grounds into a circus of speculation and analysis. William was already awake, sitting in their private living room with his laptop open, scrolling through the avalanche of reactions that continued to pour in from around the globe. His expression was a mixture of fascination and concern as he read headlines ranging from royal revolution to duty abandoned. "How bad is it?" Catherine asked, settling beside him on the sofa with a cup of ginger tea, her new morning routine to combat the intensifying pregnancy symptoms. "Mixed," William replied honestly, turning the laptop so she could see. "The Telegraph is calling it a dangerous precedent, but The Guardian says we're modernizing monarchy for the 21st century. Social media is completely split." Catherine scanned the trending hashtags, #RoyalBaby4, #ModernMonarchy, #RoyalRevolution, and, unfortunately, #RoyalSelfish. The comments ranged from heartfelt congratulations and support to harsh criticism about abandoning duty and taxpayer-funded privilege. "The children will see this eventually," Catherine said softly, her hand moving protectively to her stomach. "How do we protect them from the negative reactions?" Before William could answer, their private secretary appeared in the doorway with an urgent expression. "Your Royal Highnesses, I'm sorry to disturb you so early, but we have several pressing matters that require immediate attention." George came running into the room, still in his pajamas, his face bright with excitement. "Mummy, Daddy, Mrs. Thompson says there are people with cameras outside my school." "Are we famous?" Catherine and William exchanged glances. Their 9-year-old son's innocent question highlighted exactly how unprepared they had been for the immediate impact on their children's daily lives. "We've always been in the public eye, darling," Catherine explained gently, pulling George onto her lap. "But, yesterday we shared some special news about our family, so there are more people interested than usual." "Is it about the baby?" George asked with the directness that only children possessed. "I heard Mrs. Thompson talking to another teacher about a baby." William smiled despite the chaos swirling around them. "Yes, it is about a baby. Mummy and Daddy are going to have another little one, which means you'll be a big brother again." George's face lit up with genuine delight. "Can we tell Charlotte and Louis? Can I help choose the name?" "Of course you can help," Catherine said, hugging him close. "But, right now, we need to have a family meeting about some other changes that are happening." Their private secretary cleared his throat diplomatically. "Perhaps after the family discussion? We have calls from the Prime Minister's office, 3 different Commonwealth Governors-General, and the Archbishop of Canterbury. Plus 17 international news organizations requesting exclusive interviews." William felt the familiar weight of royal responsibility settling back onto his shoulders, but this time it felt different. Instead of automatic compliance, he found himself questioning which of these demands truly required immediate attention and which were simply the machinery of royal protocol grinding forward out of habit. Schedule a call with the PM for this afternoon, he decided. Send our regards to the Governors General and let them know we'll be in touch personally within the week. As for interviews, we're not ready for those yet. Catherine noticed the subtle but significant change in William's approach. He was making decisions based on priority and personal readiness rather than simply accepting whatever was demanded of him. It was exactly the kind of evolution they had hoped to achieve. Princess Charlotte appeared in the doorway, her hair tousled from sleep, looking confused by the unusual activity in the house. "Why is it so noisy outside?" she asked, climbing up beside George on the sofa. "Because sometimes when our family has news, people want to talk about it," William explained, gathering both older children close. "And we have very exciting news, we're going to have a new baby brother or sister." Charlotte's eyes widened with excitement. "Really? When? Can I hold the baby? Can I teach it to draw?" Catherine laughed, feeling some of the tension from the media storm begin to ease. "The baby will come in the summer, and, yes, you can definitely help teach lots of things. But, first, we need to talk about some other changes in our family." Over the next hour, William and Catherine carefully explained to George and Charlotte that while Daddy would still be a prince and would still do important work, they were going to spend more time at home and focus on fewer but more meaningful projects. They framed it as a positive choice to be more present as parents while still serving their country. "So you'll be home more for dinner?" George asked hopefully. "That's exactly right," William confirmed, feeling a surge of conviction that they had made the right decision. Little Prince Louis toddled in just as they finished the explanation, oblivious to the historic nature of the morning, more interested in the fact that breakfast seemed to be delayed. As Catherine helped Louis with his breakfast, William's phone rang with a call from Princess Anne. His aunt's voice was characteristically direct when he answered. "Well, you've certainly stirred things up, haven't you?" Anne said without preamble. William braced himself for criticism, but instead heard something unexpected in his aunt's tone, amusement and, perhaps even approval. "I've been saying for years that we need to focus more on substance and less on ceremony," and continued. "Though I have to admit, your timing is dramatic. Announcing a pregnancy and a role revolution simultaneously? That takes confidence. We wanted to be honest about everything at once rather than managing multiple announcements," William explained. "Smart approach. And, for what it's worth, I think you're right about the children needing more freedom to choose their own paths. I've watched too many young royals struggle with the weight of predetermined expectations." The conversation with Anne was followed by calls from other family members, some supportive, others more cautious, all recognizing that William and Catherine's decision would affect the entire royal family. By mid-morning, Catherine was feeling overwhelmed by the intensity of the response and the realization that their private family decision had become an international news event. She retreated to their private garden, where the sounds of helicopters and street crowds were muted by high walls and ancient trees. William found her there 20 minutes later, sitting on a bench beneath a rose bush that had been planted when George was born. "Regretting our choice?" he asked gently, settling beside her. Catherine was quiet for a moment, her hand resting on her stomach where their fourth child continued growing, oblivious to the controversy swirling around its existence. "No," she said finally. "But I'm realizing the magnitude of what we've set in motion. This isn't just about our family anymore. We've opened a conversation about the future of monarchy that goes far beyond our personal choices." William nodded thoughtfully. "I've been thinking the same thing. The responses aren't really about us, they're about what people want the royal family to be in the modern world." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play in the distance while considering the weight of representing not just their own values, but the hopes and fears of millions of people who look to the monarchy for either stability or progress. "There's something else," Catherine said eventually. "I've been reading some of the international coverage, and it's interesting how different countries are interpreting our decision." William looked at her questioningly. "In Australia and Canada, the reaction is largely positive. they're saying we're making the monarchy more relevant and relatable. In more traditional Commonwealth countries, there's more concern about maintaining established protocols. Which makes sense, William mused. Different societies have different relationships with tradition and change. Catherine's phone buzzed with a message from her private secretary, positive response from Young Families Organisation in Wales. They're requesting a meeting about work-life balance initiatives. She showed the message to William, who smiled. Already, people are seeing opportunities for meaningful engagement rather than just ceremonial duties. As the day progressed, the initial shock of their announcement began to settle into more thoughtful analysis. Serious political commentators started examining the implications for constitutional monarchy, while parenting experts praised their prioritization of family time. International relations specialists debated the impact on Britain's soft power, while mental health advocates applauded their emphasis on authenticity and well-being. By evening, when the family gathered for dinner, a meal they shared at home for the first time in weeks, Catherine realized that their decision had sparked exactly the kind of conversation she had hoped for. The monarchy wasn't just being discussed as an ancient institution preserved in amber, but as a living, evolving organization that could adapt to serve contemporary society. "How was your first day as part of a royal revolution?" William asked with a tired but satisfied smile as they tucked the children into bed. "Exhausting, terrifying, and somehow exactly right," Catherine replied, feeling the baby flutter in response to her emotions. "I think our little one is going to be born into a very different royal family than the one we grew up in. A better one," William said with conviction, "because it will be one that chooses service over obligation, authenticity over perfection, and love over duty." As they prepared for bed, both of them worn out from managing the day's crisis and excitement, Catherine reflected on how dramatically their lives had changed in just 48 hours. The surprise announcement that had started as a private family discussion had become a global conversation about tradition, change, and the future of one of the world's oldest institutions. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more questions, and undoubtedly more intense scrutiny. But, tonight, as Catherine felt their baby's gentle movements and listened to William's steady breathing beside her, she felt peaceful knowing they had chosen a path that honored both their responsibilities and their hearts. The world might still be debating their decision, but their family was finally aligned with their deepest values. That, Catherine thought as she drifted off to sleep, was worth any amount of controversy. 6 months after their momentous announcement, Catherine stood in the newly renovated nursery at Kensington Palace, her hand resting on her now prominent belly as she watched William assemble a rocking chair, a gift from a children's charity in Wales that had become their first major partnership under their new approach to royal service. The summer sun streamed through windows that had been fitted with special glass to prevent telephoto photography, a necessary adaptation to their increased media attention. Despite the ongoing scrutiny, the past half-year had proven that their decision to reshape their royal roles was not just sustainable, but transformative. The Cambridge Early Years Initiative launched 3 new programs this month, William said, pausing in his chair assembly to read from his tablet. The Maternal Mental Health Support Network reached over 10,000 families, and the Father Engagement Program has a waiting list of 6 months. Catherine smiled, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction that had been missing during her years of traditional royal duties. It's amazing what happens when you can focus deeply on fewer things rather than spreading yourself thin across dozens of ceremonial obligations. Their transformation hadn't been without challenges. The first month after the announcement had been particularly difficult, with harsh criticism from traditional royalists and uncomfortable scrutiny of their every move. Several senior courtiers had resigned in protest, and there had been heated parliamentary debates about the role of working royals. But, gradually, the initial shock had given way to grudging respect and, then, genuine admiration. When Catherine had attended a housing project in Manchester, not for a ribbon-cutting ceremony, but to spend 3 days working alongside families and understanding their daily challenges, the media coverage had been overwhelmingly positive. When William had taken George and Charlotte to visit a children's hospital and stayed for several hours reading stories and playing games, rather than the traditional 15-minute walkabout, public opinion had begun to shift decisively in their favor. Prince George burst into the nursery, his face flushed with excitement from football practice. At 10 years old, he was beginning to understand the broader implications of his parents' decision and had surprised them with his thoughtful questions about royal duty and personal choice. "Mummy, Mrs. Wilson says I can write about our family for my school project on modern families," he announced. "Can I interview you about why you and Daddy changed your jobs?" Catherine exchanged glances with William, both of them still amazed by how naturally their children had adapted to their family's evolution. "Of course you can, darling. What kinds of questions do you want to ask?" George pulled out a notebook with the serious demeanor of a seasoned journalist. "Why did you decide that being with us was more important than cutting ribbons? Are you happier now? Will the new baby have to be a prince or princess, or can they choose something else?" William stopped his furniture assembly, struck by the sophistication of his son's questions. "Those are excellent questions, George. Very thoughtful." "I've been thinking about it," George said with the earnestness that sometimes made him seem much older than his years. "Some kids at school say their parents are always too busy for them because of work. But you and Mummy changed your work so you could be with us more. That's different from what most parents do." Catherine felt tears prick her eyes, recognizing that their decision had given their children exactly what they had hoped for, a sense that they were valued as individuals rather than simply future royal duties. Princess Charlotte appeared in the doorway, her arms full of drawings she had made for the new baby's room. "I drew pictures of all of us," she announced proudly, spreading the artwork across the nursery floor. "This one is Mummy and Daddy helping children, and this one is all of us playing together, and this one is the new baby being happy because they get to choose what they want to be when they grow up." William knelt beside his daughter, studying her innocent but profound artwork. "These are beautiful, Charlotte. You've captured exactly what we hoped for our family." The afternoon was interrupted by their private secretary's arrival with the weekly briefing. The format had changed dramatically since their role transformation. Instead of a dozen ceremonial engagements and ribbon cuttings, their schedule now included intensive multi-day commitments to causes they cared deeply about. The Mental Health Summit in Scotland next week has been expanded to 3 days due to overwhelming interest, their secretary reported. The Early Years Foundation Conference in October is now fully booked with a waiting list of over 500 organizations. And the BBC documentary about your new approach to royal service has been commissioned for an hour-long special. Catherine felt a contraction and placed her hand on her lower back, breathing carefully through the sensation. At 37 weeks pregnant, she was officially on maternity leave from all official duties, but she continued to work on policy development and strategic planning from home. "Everything all right?" William asked, immediately attentive to her discomfort. "Just practice contractions," Catherine assured him, though she made a mental note that they seemed to be getting stronger and more frequent. As evening approached, the family gathered in their private sitting room for what had become their favorite new tradition, dinner together every night when they were in London, followed by family time without phones, work calls, or official interruptions. It was a simple change, but one that had transformed the rhythm of their daily lives. King Charles arrived unexpectedly during dinner, his presence causing brief excitement among the children but no longer the formal protocol disruption it might have caused before their role change. "Grandfather!" Prince Louis called out, now confident enough to interrupt royal conversation with the enthusiasm of a 3-year-old. Charles smiled, settling into a chair beside his youngest grandson. "I hope you don't mind the intrusion, but I wanted to share some news that I thought you should hear first." William and Catherine looked at him with interest, wondering what development might warrant a personal visit. "I've been reviewing the data from your first 6 months of reformed royal service," Charles began, his tone carrying both pride and amazement. "The public engagement statistics are remarkable. Your social media following has increased by 400%, public approval ratings are the highest they've been in a decade, and, more importantly, the causes you're supporting are seeing unprecedented levels of public engagement and financial support." Catherine felt another contraction, stronger this time, but tried to focus on her father-in-law's words. But, perhaps most significantly, Charles continued, Commonwealth leaders have been commenting positively on your approach. The Governor-General of Canada specifically mentioned that your focus on authentic engagement rather than ceremonial duties has increased positive sentiment toward the monarchy among younger populations. William felt a surge of vindication for their controversial decision. So our gamble is paying off? More than paying off, Charles confirmed. You've proven that modernizing royal service doesn't weaken the institution, it strengthens it by making it more relevant and relatable to contemporary society. Catherine stood up abruptly, her face pale as she felt a distinctly different sensation. William, she said quietly, I think we need to call the doctor. The room immediately shifted into organized chaos. William helped Catherine to a chair while calling their medical team, the children were gently redirected to their nanny, and Charles coordinated with palace security for a discreet transfer to the private hospital wing. Is the baby coming now? Charlotte asked with wide eyes, while George looked excited and slightly nervous. It looks like your little brother or sister is ready to meet the family, Catherine managed to say between contractions, her voice calm despite the increasing intensity of labor. 4 hours later, as London settled into late evening quiet, Catherine and William welcomed their fourth child, a healthy baby girl with a surprisingly loud cry and a head full of dark hair. As Catherine held her newest daughter, she felt overwhelming gratitude for the journey that had brought them to this moment. She's beautiful, William whispered, gently touching his daughter's tiny hand. Have you thought about what we'll call her? Catherine looked down at the baby who had been growing within her during the most transformative period of their family's life. I was thinking. Hope, she said softly. Princess Hope. Because that's what she represents, hope for a different kind of royal life, hope for choices and authenticity, hope for a monarchy that serves people's real needs. William nodded, understanding completely. Princess Hope Elizabeth Diana Cambridge, he said formally, honoring both his grandmother and mother while establishing his daughter's identity within their transformed family. As news of the royal birth spread around the world in the early morning hours, the response was notably different from the coverage of their previous children. Instead of focusing solely on titles, succession, and ceremonial traditions, media outlets celebrated the birth of a princess who would grow up in a royal family that had dared to prioritize love, authenticity, and meaningful service over rigid protocol. The surprise from the palace that had begun with an unexpected pregnancy announcement and a revolutionary approach to royal duty had culminated in the birth of a child who symbolized everything William and Catherine hoped their family could represent. As Catherine nursed her daughter in the quiet hospital room, with William beside her and their 3 other children sleeping safely at home, she felt profound peace knowing they had chosen a path that honored both their heritage and their hearts. Princess Hope would grow up in a royal family that had proven change was not just possible, but powerful. Their surprise had indeed left the royals reeling, but, in the end, it had left them stronger, more united, and more purposeful than ever before. The monarchy would continue to evolve, guided by the revolutionary idea that service could be both dutiful and joyful, traditional and innovative, royal and deeply, authentically human.